Hey Newlife, my name is Tim, for those of you that don't know me. And some of you may have seen my face before, some of you will have seen my face before, but some of you perhaps have never met me. But going back a few years now, actually probably nearly 2 years, my wife and I both were at Newlife Church every single Sunday, and we were serving on the worship team for quite a while there. And towards the start of last year, we had actually left Newlife for a little bit to go and help with the church plant here on the Sunshine Coast. And towards the end of last year, we really believed that God was calling us, that time in our lives and that season helping with the church plant was over, and that a new season was coming. But we weren't really sure what that looked like as of yet. But as we continued to pray and seek where God would have us in a new church, again He led us back to Newlife, and hence we have started coming back to Newlife. But it was probably only, I think, 3 weeks in our time coming back to Newlife that we this whole coronavirus pandemic just started to blow up, and ultimately, as we all know, that we have for a long while now not been able to have church services. And I think for some people that this can be, for us as Christians, can be quite a shaky time, because in a certain way I think church is such our church meeting becomes such a central thing to who we are as Christians. And I think that sometimes without even realizing it, we can almost make a church meeting and become very much our identity of who we are as a Christian. And so when that's stripped away from us, it's almost like, not that we stop being a Christian, but it can be very challenging for some of us to continue to stand strong as Christians, and to continue to seek after God every single day, and to live our lives fully committed to who He is. And yet that's what we should be doing. And I think one of the important realizations that we have to have, and that I've come to even during this time where we haven't been able to have church meetings, is that regardless of whether we can meet as a church or not, we still have the same mission and the same mandate as Christians to go and tell the world about Jesus. And despite social restrictions, despite whatever it might be, there are still ways that we can get out into the world, whether it's literally out in the world, or whether it's perhaps through messaging to people, or phone calls to people. We can still be on track with this mission and mandate, because despite our meeting together as a church not being able to happen at the moment, we are still the church. And as Christians, we are still God's people, and we still have that same mission. And so I was reading this scripture, which I want to read to you out of John 4, and starting in verse 23. And Jesus is talking to the Samaritan woman, and he says, "A time is coming, and is now come, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth." And interestingly, just before this, as he talks to the Samaritan woman, he talks about how previously people have worshipped in particular places, whether if for some it was on a particular mountain, or in the city of Jerusalem, and this was the place that people had to go to worship. And yet Jesus says to her that a time is coming when people aren't going to worship like that anymore. You're not going to have to go to this mountain to worship, and you're not going to have to go to that city to be able to worship, but the true worshippers that God desires will simply worship in the Spirit and in truth. And as much as we can throw this around, we just have to worship in spirit and truth, but I think what this really means is that first and foremost, we have to worship from our spirit, from our very innermost being. We have to worship God with our whole heart, not just when we sing, but with our entire life, that we would live a life of devotion and worship to our God that is genuine, that is from the heart, that's not just because you go to church, or that's not just because of all these familiar things that we have as Christians, but that it's actually something that comes deep from within who we are. And secondly, that we're supposed to worship in truth. That the things that we say about who God is, that the things that we declare to God should be truth, not just about who God is, but also truth from our heart, that we actually mean it when we say it, that when we say we love God, or when we sing a song, that the things that we sing and the things we say about who God is and our love for him have to be genuine, that we can't fake it with God. He knows our hearts anyways, and his desire is that we would be those kind of worshippers, that we will worship from our spirit, from our heart, and in absolute truth, not because of a ritual, not because of we usually go to church every Sunday, but because from our very innermost being, we simply love God and worship him with our whole spirit, our whole heart, and in all truth. So the song that I want to sing and worship with you today is just a simple song called Simplicity, and it's literally about this whole idea of just this simplistic worship to God, that it's even asked that God would just strip everything else away until only he remains. And I think that this is so important, that we remember that we don't have to have everything around us, our familiar things, our church, or maybe it's what we become familiar with, a big band to worship God, or whatever those familiar things might be to us, that we don't need that even when everything is stripped away and only Jesus remains, that's all that matters. Because even when we worshipped with all the familiar things around us, it was supposed to be all about him in the first place anyway. So why don't you join me as I sing and as we would worship God together in simplicity and in spirit and in truth before him. Jesus, you're the one I worship. I come in simplicity, longing for purity, to worship you in spirit and truth, only you. Lord, strip it all away until only you remain. 'Cause I'm coming back to my first love, only you. And you're the reason I sing, the reason I sing. Yes, it's you. Yes, my heart will sing how I love you, Jesus, and forever I'll sing. Forever I'll sing. Yes, my heart will sing how I love you. And I come with my broken song to you, the perfect one, to worship you in spirit and truth, only you. And give me a childlike heart, lead first love. It's all about you, Jesus. It's all about you. You're the reason for my song. You're the reason I'm alive. How I love you, God. I love you forever, yeah, yeah. And you're the reason I sing. The reason I sing. Yes, my heart will sing how I love you, and forever I'll sing. Forever I'll sing. Yes, my heart will sing how I love you. And forever I'll sing. Forever I'll sing. Yes, my heart will sing how I love you.